Hello, this is the Fiction Nonfiction Podcast from Literary Hub, where we believe that every issue in your social media feed or on the evening news has already been tackled somewhere in literature. I'm Whitney Terrell, author of the novel The Good Lieutenant.
And I'm V.V. Ganeshananthan, also known as Sugi, author of the novel Brotherless Night.
Have you ever needed, I don't know, a get out of jail free card?
You mean like in Monopoly, my least favorite board game?
You don't like Monopoly?
I hate Monopoly. It's the worst.
Oh man, come on. All right. Do you know that Monopoly is okay? It's set in Atlantic City, as you may or may not know, which seems to be actually relevant to where I'm headed with this. But come on, in real life, not Monopoly, have you ever done something that you need to get, like off your record? Just kind of pretend that didn't happen.
I feel like this should be a question I should be asking you.
Well, that's why I'm writing this script, so I don't have to answer this question. You've never been at fault in an accident, paid the wrong amount of taxes, got busted for drinking underage. Come on. Okay, here's one. Received a B on a test where you really needed to get an A.
This is probably, have we done an episode on taking the fifth? No. So like what? The closest I've come to needing I definitely like early in my history as a driver was in a car accident that was my fault. Um, I don't know. I like have been known to eat the last Girl Scout cookie. Um, We're here today to talk about someone who has done things that are genuinely unpardonable, in my opinion. Um, and that is Ghislaine Maxwell, who is currently in prison for helping Jeffrey Epstein sexually traffic young girls. I'm sure many of our listeners are among the people who are absorbed in the story, which is dominating the headlines lately. Um, and there is some speculation that the terrible things that put Ghislaine Maxwell in jail originally after her trial in 2021 might actually now help to get her out. And so, to help us parse through the wildly complicated and often just totally wild details of this case, we are joined today by Dan Adler.
Dan Adler is a staff writer at Vanity Fair covering culture, celebrity, and more. His work has spanned profiles of influential characters and connectors, investigations at the fringes of fame, and the criminal trials of Ghislaine Maxwell and Donald Trump. His reporting for Vanity Fair on Justin Bieber's former megachurch Hillsong was the basis for the FX docuseries The Secrets of Hillsong. He was born in Brooklyn and lives in Manhattan. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So we're taping, just for our listeners to know, on Friday, July 25th. And last week, Dan, you published an article on Ghislaine Maxwell's recent fight to get out from under a 20-year sentence that she received for facilitating Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. We're going to get to that in a little bit, but you covered her trial, which was back in 2021. Could you just give us a little background on who she is and how she ended up connected to Jeffrey Epstein?
Yeah, the trial feels like a long time ago with everything that's happened since. Ghislaine Maxwell is a British socialite. She's very much from the world of Prince Andrew, royals, aristocrats. She went to Oxford. Her father was a famous publishing baron who, like Epstein, died under mysterious circumstances. Without everything that's happened as far as her criminal trial and as far as everything with Epstein, she would be a notable social figure. She's also, of course, taken on this other valence as one of the leading villains in the popular imagination because of her association with Epstein and because of the charges that she was eventually convicted on, which were facilitating Epstein's abuse of minors.
So I just want to, her dad was well known, right? He was wealthy, publisher, is that correct? And rumored to be in Mossad, connected to all kinds of crazy sort of stuff there. What I want to talk about a little bit is how much and if you don't know the answers, it's fine, but like, do we have any sense of why she became interested in Jeffrey Epstein? Like, did she ever talk about this? Like, how, just in the origins of their relationship, like, why would she end up with this guy?
Yeah, there are different accounts of the timeline, but one way or another, she and Epstein connected in the late 80s, early 90s. And yeah, I would say loosely overlapping social circles. There have been some reports that her father actually introduced her to Epstein, and then the popular sort of pop psychology explanation. And I don't know these people personally. I don't want to put too much stock in it, but I think it makes a degree of sense, is that her father was this larger than life figure, well connected, wealthy. He died. By all accounts, she was very much left adrift. And again, in sort of the popular account, that's where Epstein comes into the picture. Perhaps he fills some space in her life that her father did prior.
So she was kind of like a lost rich kid, basically, or a lost well-known kid.
I think that's a fair way to look at it. She's someone who, like so many wealthy aristocrats, sort of bounces between philanthropic causes, social scenes. There's a lot of, and this was one of my main takeaways from the trial. Actually, is you see how much time how much time and energy these people devote to filling their days with sort of like rich people things, planning the trips, getting the stationery. Yeah, I mean, those were sort of the funnier parts of the trial. But what her maybe job is too strong. What her function ended up being ultimately was orchestrating Jeffrey Epstein's mystique, and that means everything from connecting him with Prince Andrew and Bill Clinton, that kind of thing, being in the same rooms and glad handing, to making sure he had the right stationery.
So
like
I
a
mean,
concierge of persona.
Yeah, and that's another element of their relationship that continues to intrigue me, is that Epstein, like Donald Trump, is an outer boroughs guy, trying to make it big in Manhattan. He's from Coney Island. Maxwell is went to Oxford. She's born and bred. There's a social dialogue happening that I'm sure Maxwell was helpful in.
I have a question about now. I mean, Suki and I both went to Ivy League schools, not to brag, but because we also know rich people who were like this, who came from a famous, well-known family, or you can be well-known and be in social circles, but not have money or have lost the money, right? And I just wonder, like, did she have money, or did she actually need money? And
Well, another
Epstein was a
power.
vehicle for this.
Yeah, hard to say. But another parallel uh, between Epstein and Robert Maxwell, Glenn's father, is that there's a lot of intrigue around what the actual finances were. It emerged after Robert Maxwell died that he committed fairly serious financial mismanagement having to do with his employees' pensions, and after death, was a disgraced figure. Um, yeah, take your point. Like, what's the actual amount of money in the bank accounts, and what of it is sort of smoke and mirrors? Um, knowing the right people who can let you do rich people things, even if you yourself can't finance them. And there was just a great report today in Forbes trying to trace together Epstein's wealth. So I think those continue to be among the many questions that continue to surround this case, however many years later. That the nuts and bolts of the finances, I think, for people who watch these two people very closely, continues to be sort of the central one.
So yeah, one of the main questions being, how did he fund this? And it seems like it's not clear that she had the money, but it seems like she was managing the logistics of this in a way that at least she's a big part of this financial puzzle. And as you say, an outer boroughs guy, I think of nothing more than I think of Dan Bass from Gossip Girl, and like trying to crack the evil circles of Manhattan, guy from Brooklyn. And it's interesting to think about it that way. But yeah, the question of kind of like if she had the money, or if she was just sort of like pulling other people's purse strings, seems like it's still oblique.
Yeah, it wouldn't be Maxwell supplying Epstein with money, but by most accounts, Epstein, the two main sources of his wealth over a few decades were first Leslie Wexner, who operated Victoria's Secret, and then Leon Black, a hedge fund guy. Yeah, I think it's hard to say, looking back, I guess, 3 decades, what exactly each person's financial situation was when Maxwell and Epstein met. I think one undeniable thing is that both of them were this was the air they breathed. This is Maxwell knows how to operate in these rooms. She knows what it means to comport yourself as a very wealthy person, even if you're not one.
Well, talking about her comporting herself, I mean, when you were covering the trial, did you did you attend the trial itself, or did you cover it? Okay. So I
Yes, I
wondered
was
if you
there.
could just for listeners, because this is something that you don't get on the reporting, and one of the reasons we asked you to be here, is uh, just describe what she acted like in person. Was she brassy? Was she quiet? I assume she speaks with a British accent. How did she dress? Like, what was she just like as a figure?
One of the frustrating things about covering any criminal trial is that the defendant really doesn't say
Or
anything.
okay, and did she
You know,
get to dress how she wanted? I was thinking, oh my God, maybe she's just in the jumpsuit. So that was a dumb question, but yeah.
no, she wore civilian clothes, and as with all things Maxwell and Epstein, there's again sort of like this pop psychology aspect of it. She was wearing all white at one point, and people speculated about whether she wanted to communicate a certain image of herself as innocent. I think this is something that she's done a couple of jailhouse interviews in the time since she was convicted. She's always sort of carried herself with a stiff upper lip, this sort of British aristocratic bearing. And to the extent that you could observe anything about her behavior during the trial, that was the sense I got, that she was very much trying to sort of put on an even face and carry herself as someone who had nothing to hide and did nothing wrong.
So bringing us up to the present day, on July 7th, just earlier this month, the Justice Department and the FBI released this 2-page memo, and I'm quoting from NPR here, that they have found no evidence that disgraced financier and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein had a client list or that he blackmailed prominent associates. And they also said that Epstein died by suicide, which many people don't believe. And this satisfied no one, in part because there's been all this speculation about these so-called Epstein files, Pam Bondi being like, what file? But I would think that a lot of the evidence at Ghislaine Maxwell's trial came from those files. So like, what evidence comes up at this trial? Do you have any sense of how much more, like, if this was the tip of the iceberg, what does the rest of the iceberg look like?
Yeah, it's I mean, I think this is part of the reason for the enduring intrigue is that who can say, right? We're talking about documents that we haven't seen. I also think just the phrase Epstein files just conjures this sort of uh, air of mystery.
It's like the X-Files.
It's like the X-Files, and yeah, also the idea of the Epstein list, which doesn't seem to exist. But so the files, the Epstein files, if you take it at the most sort of in the most serious sense, are the files related to the federal government's investigations of Jeffrey Epstein. So that could involve everything from messages that he sent to friends, communications with victims, flight logs, just there are videotapes, and people speculate about whether those videotapes have something to do with a blackmail ring. Those videotapes could well be child pornography that the government doesn't want to release for very understandable reasons. So what is actually in the Epstein files, by virtue of the fact that they're not being released, is something that remains unknown. I think one thing that I really took away from the Maxwell trial is that this is, I think there are two avenues of inquiry into this kind of case. There's a criminal investigation, and when prosecutors bring a criminal case against someone, it's not to answer every single question about a celebrity that any curious onlooker might have. It's to secure a conviction. It's a very narrow criminal process. So I think a lot of people came to the Maxwell trial feeling like this is when we'll finally get the answers about who Epstein was providing minors to. And the trial was not about that. It was about a very specific set of victims and Maxwell and her role in facilitating these victims coming into Jeffrey Epstein's home.
So did those victims testify, and what did they say that she did?
They did, and probably goes without saying, but it was harrowing. You could the aspect I remember the most vividly is hearing the victims talk about their backgrounds and what would happen in if not all, most of the cases was that this would be someone who came from some sort of troubled background, history of drug abuse, history of being sexually abused, someone who needed someone to look out for them. And Ghislaine Maxwell in these accounts would come along. This was not part of the trial, but this is another sort of famous instance. Virginia Giuffre, who passed away recently and is sort of the most prominent Epstein victim. She's recalled how her father was a janitor at Mar-a-Lago, and Maxwell approached her there. Maxwell, in the accounts given during testimony, was someone who would take a 14, 15, 16-year-old girl under her wing and bring them into the fold. She has this sort of polished bearing, and she's saying, as victims outlined in their testimony, that Maxwell made them feel like it was okay to be where they were and do what they were doing.
But she would give them tips on how to have sex with Jeffrey Epstein, right? I mean, very specifically.
Yes. But before that, the grooming process, as outlined at the trial, was a socialization. It was again, here, this is a girl, as young as 14, who was looking for something, and then again, this elegant woman coming along and saying, "This is how you can live."
So one of the things that I feel like the people I know are now divided into two sets: people who listen to Epstein coverage constantly and people who can't bear to. And like the level of comprehension obviously ranging there. So like one of the things that my own husband was trying to explain to me was about the non-prosecution agreements, and you also talk about this in your coverage about, like, right, the notion that she wasn't given a fair trial, so can you talk a little bit about like what are non-prosecution agreements, and in the context of this case, how do they pertain to her? Like, why does she think she should not be in jail?
So the Epstein story has been bubbling in one way or another for it feels to me, and to I assume most people, that it feels like a very recent phenomenon, because it's only in the past since 2018 that it's become this sort of national obsession. But you can go back and read reports dating back to the early 2000s about investigations taking place into Jeffrey Epstein, and that the main thing that happened in towards the end of the 2000s is Epstein signed what is probably the most infamous non-prosecution agreement in history, which is that he was able to plead guilty to soliciting a child for prostitution. And one thing that let him do, I assume, is to be able to say, I was in this sticky situation. I pleaded guilty to this one thing. There was not a sense following that agreement that he was the serial predator that we later learned that he was. Maxwell is claiming right now that the non-prosecution agreement he signed at that time should also shield her from prosecution, because one of the stipulations of the agreement was that Epstein's co-conspirators would be immune as well. And one thing the Department of Justice has done recently in refuting that claim from Maxwell is say, well, that was an agreement signed in Florida and Maxwell was convicted in New York.
Thanks for explaining.
Okay. So I wanted to say this. I was going to say this earlier, but just to be clear, Jeffrey Epstein's the prime bad dude in this. But Ghislaine Maxwell did some terrible things, as we've just outlined, and she is really sort of at the center of what's happening right now in terms of the Epstein case, because she's still alive and may have information. So after the Justice Department said nothing to see here, then we're just going to do a little TikTok here. On July 17th, the Wall Street Journal published an article about this infamous birthday card that Trump allegedly created for Jeffrey Epstein, including a drawing of a naked woman and a weirdly suggestive dialogue that everyone can look up. We're not going to repeat it here, referencing their wonderful secret. And it appears that book was put together by Ghislaine Maxwell and is now held by Epstein's executors, I read somewhere. I don't know if that's correct or not. And then just last night, the New York Times published an article confirming that Trump's name is on the list of its contributors. So do we know if Ghislaine or her counsel or supporters showed this drawing to the Journal? If so, why would they have done that? How did the Times find out about what's going on here?
Yeah, unclear on the sourcing, because these are good reporters who, if they could disclose that, I assume they would have. But yeah, so as you mentioned, Brad Edwards, who's a lawyer for many Epstein victims, has said that Epstein's estate is in possession of this birthday book. Ro Khanna, the congressman, has said that he intends to subpoena Epstein's estate for that book. It's possible, again, we haven't seen the so-called Epstein files. It's possible that book is part of that cache of files. It's unclear. There's also a report in the Times recently that Trump was told during his briefing with Pam Bondi that his name appeared in these files. It's unclear if it's in reference to that book or something else. I think part of the reason for the confusion, again, is just like the sense of the Epstein files. What does it actually mean? If you're mentioned in them, what does it imply, if anything? The Epstein files could mean that I went to the same middle school as Jeffrey Epstein. You could be mentioned in any capacity in relation to this person, and your name could come up in these files. It doesn't mean that you did anything untoward.
So, I mean, of course, like the White House's first response to this is like just to be like this document is like a lie. It doesn't exist. Fake, fake, fake. And
Trump sued.
Yeah, right. He sued. And then also, right, he's suing the Wall Street Journal. And then, last night I'm prepping for this episode, read your article, like thinking about Ghislaine Maxwell. And I opened the Times website and there's like this letter in her handwriting. It is scanned and uploaded to this Times article. And it's just channeling kind of the description that you had, imagining her reading it in this posh voice, like, Jeffrey, darling, I hope you have had such a splendid birthday. It's so creepy. It's so creepy and horrible. And they published, the Wall Street Journal published another article, and Trump had these denials, and then the DOJ interviewed Ghislaine Maxwell yesterday, and they kept interviewing her apparently today. Like, what do you think they're asking her? What would you ask her?
So, just a few minutes before the three of us got on this call, Maxwell's lawyer addressed reporters, and he said that Maxwell answered questions about, I don't want to misquote him, but something like 100 Epstein associates. And again, that could mean any number of things. If you believe the most extreme version of the speculation around Epstein, maybe you think that it's referring to a so-called client list, but it could also mean, again, people who Epstein has communicated with, who he knew, who he was making money with, however many other things. So we do not know what specifically was discussed in those 2 days of meetings. And as far as what I would ask Maxwell, where to start? I'd want to test the assuming we're in some setting where she is speaking truthfully, which by the way, she was before she was convicted on the charges of facilitating Epstein's abuse. She was also charged with perjury. So this is not someone who I think anyone should necessarily take at face value. But I think the thing that I think has caused and will continue to cause this to be a American international preoccupation is the notion that there was a broader trafficking operation happening outside of Epstein's crimes. So I think you'd want to ask her if that's the case. She was charged with trafficking victims to Epstein, which of course is a terrible thing, and she was convicted and she's in jail for that. The speculation continues to be that that's only a slice of it, that she and Epstein were also trafficking underage victims to a larger list of high-profile men.
So one of the things that this story is being covered wall to wall and everywhere except Fox News, basically. But the thing that we think we can bring to listeners also is like, there's some parts of your article that I thought like had some interesting characters in them that I wanted to talk about, and have you talk to us about them. And you quote a number of Maxwell supporters, and we're, I think, going to be hearing from them as like possibly she gets rehabilitated on the right. One of them was a woman named Lady Victoria Hervey, I guess is how you say that name, who you describe as a British socialite and Mar-a-Lago regular. I don't know. I guess that goes together. Could you talk to
Yeah.
us about some of these characters that you interviewed for this piece and then read to us a part of the article?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just say in the first place that as far as Lady Victoria Hervey, I was interested in speaking with her. She's someone I've been sort of keeping tabs on for a bit because, yeah, again, it's impossible to overstate how much the Epstein phenomenon, and by that I mean not just the crimes, but sort of like the cultural apparatus that has sprung from it, how much it has become, even in our totally fractured media ecosystem, this sort of like singular, all-encompassing story that, Epstein died, what, almost 6 years ago now, or excuse me, yeah, almost 6 years ago now. Just continues to be this, and especially for Trump, this thing that sort of dogs him. So I've been keeping tabs on Hervey. I've been keeping tabs on people in that orbit, and I'm interested in who the story continues to enchant and absorb, and how people are positioning themselves in relation to it. So for someone like, I don't doubt that Lady Victoria Hervey believes genuinely in, her one-time friends innocence, but it's also interesting to think about that in relation to the Mar-a-Lago scene, in relation to her knowing Kash Patel, as she said, Kash Patel being one of the foremost Epstein conspiracists before he entered a government role. So yeah, I wanted to sort of piece together what that ecosystem looks like. The people who are, have in some instances, kind of made their name off of this scandal. It's really been in the last few years this, especially for sort of like the still growing independent media ecosystem, podcaster, Substack. It's an inexhaustible well because it involves these crimes, and it involves these high profile figures, and it involves some really important and unsolved mysteries. So that's how I sort of tapped into all this, and I'll read a bit. Um, in recent days, a sense has emerged from this miasma that Maxwell, in her unmatched proximity to Epstein, might step in and disclose where Trump and his cabinet couldn't or wouldn't. Let her have her voice, Lady Victoria Hervey, a British socialite and Mar-a-Lago regular, tells me. Because right now, everyone is so split on what's going on, and I think the only way to really deal with the situation, let her speak. Hervey is the daughter of the 6th Marquess of Bristol and initially connected with Maxwell in the 90s London party scene. Her boyfriend at the time, a restaurateur, knew Maxwell when she was an Oxford student. Hervey also dated Prince Andrew for a period, and in recent years, coinciding with her entree into Palm Beach circles, she has been an adamant social media defender of the disgraced royal and Maxwell. California was locked down, and a lot of people were spending time in Florida, she says. Obviously, I wanted to help find out more on this Jeffrey Epstein story. Hervey says she has been in touch with some of Maxwell's lawyers and family members, and that she believes an effort to secure a pardon was in the works. I've met Kash Patel a couple of times, she tells me. I know a lot of people in the administration now. The anticipation surrounding Maxwell's next moves has been amplified by some of the most notable voices in the dense ecosystem of podcasts, newsletters, and influencers that have developed around the overall Epstein saga. I'm no political strategist, but Maxwell is the only viable reset button, Jessica Reed Krause, author of the popular politics and pop culture newsletter House and Habit, wrote this week. People don't trust politicians or media, but they'd show up to hear Ghislaine Maxwell speak. On Wednesday, Krause posted a photo of the comedian and podcaster Tim Dillon wearing a t-shirt reading "Free Ghislaine" while standing beside Alex Jones.
Thank you so much. Gosh, this is so fascinating also as like a story about journalism and the difficult way that covering sex crimes presents like this challenge of thinking about the balance between truth seeking and terrible voyeurism, which also seems at play here. And of course, the unique pressures generated by the portion of Trump's base that is clamoring for answers on this. Speaking of Alex Jones, for example, and this set of people didn't care about. I mean, there's no shortage of other accusations against President Trump. We could talk about E. Jean Carroll or Katie Johnson, just a slew of others. Why is this case the breaking point for this set of people?
I think there are a few different reasons. The main one that sticks out to me is that you can't talk about the rise of Trump as a political figure without talking about conspiracy theories. Of course, the birther conspiracy was, what gave rise to his political ascent. And, he has sort of navigated these currents ranging from QAnon into Epstein. And I think a essential part of his appeal to the MAGA base is that he represents a threat to the establishment that they believe is perpetrating these sex trafficking rings. So for him to sort of come out now and say, like, actually the establishment perspective was correct, and there's not really anything to see here, keep it moving. It really represented a fissure that, I'll just speak for myself, that I didn't see coming. Trump's grip on his base has been ironclad, and I think this is the biggest rupture to date. I think it really it chips away at the idea that he's on their side in a way that other political figures hadn't been, because it reinforces the notion that he's just Sam and Bill Clinton. Ultimately, he's just another guy in this circle who's not giving us what we want.
One of the things that I was thinking about when I was reading your piece and particularly thinking about the characters like Lady Victoria and Maxwell's like origins in British social circles, right? Is that it has always been a privilege of the rich to believe whatever in the fuck they wanted, and they don't have to have facts. They can have crank theories, doesn't matter, doesn't hurt them. They've got money to protect them. And Trump has done the same thing. He believes whatever in the hell he wants. He says whatever he wants. He doesn't care if he's lying. There's no consequences for him. He can be rude to people. He can, be abusive, and nobody says anything because he's rich. And part of what his appeal, I wonder if to the people who fell for this whole Epstein conspiracy and people who are his followers, is because they're acting the same way. It allows they're being allowed to act like rich people, right? To be rude to people, to believe crazy stuff, whatever in the hell, it doesn't matter, right? He's giving people who have never had the opportunity and privilege to act like Lady Victoria Hervey and think and believe whatever they want. Now a whole class of people have been given this privilege.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. Putting Epstein to the side, I think a perfectly good theory of Trump's ascent is the idea that he legitimizes a certain set of grievances that were not legitimized prior. You see him angry over something that you would be angry over, and him not facing any consequences for the ways in which he's angry about it. I assume if you're a MAGA true believer, that's encouraging to you.
So the last thing, this is the part that I find both funny and terrifying. Trump, just today, I heard some audio about him as he's leaving for Scotland being asked about Ghislaine and the fact that his Department of Justice has met with her yesterday and is going to meet with him again today. And all he does is say, well, what about Clinton? What about, who's the guy, Sugi, the former president of your school, who's supposedly in the Epstein files, or at least Trump was accusing? Larry Summers.
Larry
What
Summers.
about Larry Summers? And so he's listing all these other
New York
people.
Times opinion columnist Larry Summers.
But it seems, and then they asked if he was going to pardon her, and he said, well, I haven't thought about it. I could if I wanted to. So, it seems obvious to me that they're working out some sort of deal. Is it crazy to think that?
No, I don't think it's crazy to think that, because we've seen he pardoned instantly all the January 6th rioters. So nothing would shock me in that regard. I do think this is obviously a really interesting story with global political consequences. Speaking for myself, I'm trying to tread carefully, because again, just it's a really strange story, because it's both a hardcore conspiracy theory and a legitimate source of intrigue, and sometimes it can be hard to sort of figure out which parts are which. I do think that Epstein's relationships with all these high-profile people warrant further scrutiny. I don't know how helpful it is to again, just this was sort of a sport when the Epstein allegations first exploded into the national consciousness. But here's a picture of Epstein with this guy. What does that mean? Sometimes nothing. I think Trump is think if I had to guess, he probably isn't sure what he should do. I don't think he could have foreseen this exploding the way that it did and blowing up in his face. And he does this thing that he often does, this sort of rhetorical tick of keeping his options open and sort of kicking the can down the road. His favorite phrase is 2 weeks later. Just some sort of arbitrary amount of time to sort of to hedge a little bit. So I think it'll be really interesting and worrisome to see what happens in the next few weeks. Theoretically, Maxwell she's been subpoenaed for a deposition on August 11th. Her lawyer said she'll respond to that subpoena, depending on how these past 2 days of meetings have gone. I think if Trump does pardon her, I would assume he'd have to have a really good political reason to. I think he probably understands that he needs to give something to the base that is now sort of up in arms. And it's hard to see how pardoning this person who was convicted of facilitating Jeffrey Epstein's sexual abuse achieves that. But again, like as with the Epstein files and as with these closed door meetings that we don't know about yet, it's just it's hard to say what's there.
It's it's funny you mentioned the tick of the 2 weeks later, which he does always say. I have to ask, because this is the last thing that I did last night before I went to sleep. Did you see the South Park episode?
I haven't seen it. I've just read about it.
Okay, so for our listeners, this caused my family, and I assume many others, to subscribe to Paramount Plus. That South Park did a brutal episode featuring Trump. I like wanted to get Stone and Parker like a bodyguard after seeing this episode. I was like, well done. And also, I hope you're okay. I mean, he's in bed with Satan in this episode. The Epstein files are mentioned. So this is like how present this is in public consciousness. It is a very blatant, like 20-minute taunt of the president. And so it's just one example of the kind of public outcry and scrutiny about this. And this kind of pressure is, of course, like producing also, Congress has been weird for some time. It's getting just weirder in response to this. Republicans desperately trying to get people to move on, like August recess seems like a good time for everyone to chill. But no, as you mentioned, Ro Khanna of California has said he's going to subpoena the birthday book. Doesn't seem like Congress is done with this. What is the state of things in Congress? Where do you expect that to go?
Yeah, I mean, as you sort of alluded to, Democrats are having a field day. I think, especially because for so long Epstein was sort of wielded as a tool against, it was Clinton and Epstein, and now the tables have sort of turned. And I think also, there have been obviously any number of Trump scandals, and I think smart Democrats are seeing that this is the one that really, again, is sort of aggravating the base in the way that it hasn't prior. So I expect Democrats to continue to sort of harp on this as a political issue. As far as the subpoena, again, her lawyer has said that they will react depending on how these past 2 days of meetings have gone. I think the only thing that's really certain to say at this point is that we have so many Trump era stories that seem like the biggest deal in the world, and then they fritter away 2 days later. Remember when we were all talking about tariffs? This doesn't seem like that. It just seems like something more elemental as far as Trump's appeal and his base. So I expect it to continue to reverberate as like a political cudgel, but also as a cultural phenomenon.
It seems like the Republicans can't. I mean, at this point, House Republicans are like, they seem like they have no choice but to join in effectively. And we're seeing some of them do that.
Yeah. And you can see them sort of, Mike Johnson is sort of, you can see him sort of wavering. I mean, I assume if you're a Republican who has to be loyal to Trump and also appease your constituents, it's a tricky position to navigate. But that's what happens when you have your president rise to office based on conspiracy theories. It's I think a reap what you sow kind of situation.
Dan, thanks a lot. We suggest our listeners keep following your coverage of this in Vanity Fair and everything else you're writing, and we'll see what happens next. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.